Edna, Karine, the whole mishpacha, we wish you long life. Please God, her memory will be an everlasting blessing, because you are her walking, living monument here, and everything you do, no doubt, will be an honor and tremendous merit for her dear, beloved neshama. So today we are getting ready for Pesach, and the shiur that we're discussing is about the home. Because no doubt your memories, Edna, considering that your sister lived quite a distance away, have a lot to do with your home, with the way you grew up together with each other. And those memories will be with you forever. No doubt at home is where you were together, raised, and your parents cultivated the relationships between you. And for ourselves as well, as much as we come to Chabad house, it's a home. That's what we want to achieve here. That it's a home where you feel comfortable, where you feel welcome, where you come join us for shiurim. Where, by the way, there's some more people that were here before and I don't see them now. Hope people didn't disappear. They'll come back. But also, the home is a very important place. As you all saw last year, and particularly the year before, when we all went into lockdown, where did we spend most of our Pesach? Where did we fulfill most of the mitzvahs? Not in the shul, but at home. So today's shiur is dedicated to our homes, but not just the 4 meters or however big the space of your home is, even if it's an acre or more. But rather, I'm talking about making your home the place where you feel that your Judaism is most vibrant and dynamic. So let's go back to the story, the very beginning, because after all, this is one of the most dramatic stories in all of history. Unless you were watching last night's, what was it, the Emmy Awards? Which one was going on last night in California, I'm assuming? And there it got a little bit, yeah. So they said it was the most memorable night on TV. But let's talk about our own history, okay? We're a band of slaves, tortured, abused for generations, and suddenly drawn from the terrible bondage and freed by the hand of Hashem. We read about the 10 plagues. Right? Certainly, it fascinates the minds of any producer, artist, or sage. It's fascinating, okay? The wondrous stories of God smiting the defiant Pharaoh and splitting the sea, and all the details of our story that we retell year after year after year. But alongside the Torah's fascinating narrative, there's a lot that's dedicated to describing the sacrifice that the Jews were commanded to offer on the twilight of their redemption. And this was the Carbon Pesach. A sheep or a goat that the Jews were commanded to hold 4 days and then to slaughter it. Quick trivia question. What do you do if your Carbon Pesach was pregnant? It had to be a male. Trick question. Okay. Now we would slaughter it, bring it into our homes, sprinkle its blood on the doorposts of our home. There's a lot that we have to discuss about this. And if you recall, last year I gave you a different shiur about the smell, the aroma. If you guys want, I could recycle. We could talk about that tomorrow as well, because that itself is some fascinating and important lessons about Jewish pride. The fact that it couldn't be baked, and it couldn't be broiled, and it couldn't be sauteed, and it couldn't be prepared any other way. It had to be a bride. It had to be roasted in order for its smell to spread. You can't miss that aroma. Everyone had to enjoy it. And we had to be proud of who we are. But today I'm going to focus more on the inside of Judaism, the home. So let's discuss this a little bit. There are many details, there are many laws pertaining to the Carbon Pesach that the Torah tells us about. And I'll try to put as many of them on the screen as possible. Let's start with the first one. Does this sound synonymous with the beginning of lockdown 2 years ago when we were told, do not go out of your home? Where we moved on to Zoom. And still some people are on Zoom. We're accommodating them here. But for the rest of us who come to Chabad, good. I'm glad you're here, not just stuck on Zoom. Let's read the verses that the Torah tells us. It's right here in your Chumash, if you got Chumash in front of you. 350, page 350. The Torah says as follows. Hashem tells Moshe to tell the Jewish people, Be'esor lachodesh hazeh, on the 10th day of this month. Okay, I'm looking here, chapter 12, and it states as follows. Let's read it inside. V'yikchu lahem ish se leveis avos set labayis. Everyone should take to themselves a seh, a lamb for each home, a lamb for each household. Continues the verse. V'im yimat habayis miyos miseh. But if the household is too small for a lamb, what should you do? The verse says very clearly, then join up with your neighbors and, what's that? Share, of course. Right here we have the very beginning of this discussion, the importance of sharing with others. Sharing is caring, indeed. Okay, let's continue with the following verses. Set tamim, it has to be a perfect lamb. What's the next word?
Zachar.
Zachar. There goes my trick question to you. What if it's pregnant? Set tamim zachar, it has to be a male. Ben shana yihiyeh, it should be 1 year old or in its first year. And you should take either a sheep or a goat, very good. You should look after it. Ad arba asr yom lachodesh, until the 14th day of the month. What day were they given this commandment again? We read it in the earlier verse. 10th day, very good. V'higatem ala mashkof, and you should bring it to the lintel, as you can see in the picture. The shtei mezuzos, and to your doorposts. In fact, unlike the mezuzah, which is only on the right side, here it says on both sides of your lintel, you should use this blood, asher basaf. That is, how would you translate this word, asher basaf? That is in the basin. Huh? Here, the verse says, yeah. Yep. Now go back a few words. Yeah. Now why did I lose the place? I lost the verse. It says I'm forgetting what the words are. Yes, you see the words? Okay? Okay, let's go to that. Now, I'm missing, I'm forgetting which verse. Oh, hold on. Let's go forward. Go to verse 22. Yeah, let's fast forward a little bit. Ulekachtem agudat ezov, you should take a bundle of hyssop. Utvaltem badam, you should dip it into the blood. Asher basaf, that is in your basin. Yeah. You should put it onto the lintel of your doors, the ashtei mezuzot, and to the two doorposts. Here are the key words that I want you to notice about the doorway of your home. And now it says, "Vatem lo teitzu ish mipesach beso." Nobody should leave the doorway of their home. Okay, you see it right here on the wall? Do not go out of your house. Okay, let's discuss this. What's going on here? There are a few questions that I have about this, and I want you all to listen, and let's discuss this. Obviously, it's questions that you all have, but one particularly interesting detail in this prohibition is that you can't leave your house that entire night. Remember when we were told don't leave your house because you are vulnerable, you are susceptible to being affected by COVID-19? Now the Prime Minister of Israel's got it. You see the news. And in China, they've gone back into lockdown. So I hope my Chanas here are going to be careful because we don't want to go back into lockdown, or do we? Netanyahu had it 2 weeks ago, and now Bennett has it. Obama too. Well, why was God confining our ancestors to their homes? And perhaps I should say, why was God confining us? Because as the story happened 3,334 years ago, we have to see its relevance to us as well. As you all know, it's not just in the Torah, we don't read his story. This is not just Moses' story. This is our story, okay? So what's going on? Why is this curfew? Why lockdown then? What was the lockdown about? Do you remember? Oh, the 10th plague. What happened in this plague? Makat Pachorot, the firstborn. Yeah. Yes. Okay, they had to stay out. They had to stay home. Why?
In order to be safe, they had to be home because the knocking on those doorways.
Okay, who was going to be knocking on the doorways? Who we worried? Malach HaMavet. Let's look at Rashi. Look in the Chumash. Rashi says here, Mikan Magid Shemiachar Shenatna Reshut. After permission was given, Lamashchit, to the destroyer, Lechabel, to terror, to destroy, to Eina Mavchin Ben Tzadik LeRasha. The destroyer knows one thing, the Malach HaMavas. The Malach HaMavas is not given, the angel of death was on the prowl that night. Whoever gets in his way, dead. Yes? The Exodus, it says, was Hashem himself. It says for this plague, God sent the Malach HaMavas. No, it says, Hashem says, I took you out of Egypt. Yeah. No. So here we're seeing the verse, God saying, now here we're told, don't go out of your house. And Rashi tells us, because once the angel of death was on its mission, whichever firstborn he could take, he was going to fell. That was it. Right? It would be dangerous to be in his path.
So if you're not firstborn, you will save.
Well, everyone had to stay home.
Yes.
Particularly the firstborn. That's where the name Pesach comes from. Passover. God passed over the Jewish homes. Right? So the Jews had to paint their homes with the blood of the Carbon Pesach in order to identify their homes and to ensure that death didn't visit them. Right? That's the name Passover. God's promise that when the Malach HaMavas would see the blood on the doorposts of the Jewish homes, he would pass over those homes. And for the very same reason, the Jews were not allowed to leave their homes that night, for if they were to be caught outside, they would be at the mercy of the Malach HaMavas, the destroyer, the angel of death. Yes? Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Now, our beginning The birth of the Jewish nation was the Exodus. We were a small family, but now we were a Jewish nation. Okay? And we read it in the Haggadah. What do we say? What are the words? Come on, I don't have my Haggadah in front of me. In the Haggadah we say, Umaladetayich biyom huledet otach, that as for your birth, on the day you were born, your navel was not cut, neither were you washed with water for cleansing, nor were you salted, nor swaddled. You know what I'm talking about? It's from the prophet Ezekiel. In fact, we even quote, what does it say? Ve'ever alayich, I passed by you, ve'erich mibaisesef bidamayich, and I saw you wallowing in your blood. V'omer lach, I said, b'damayi chayi, v'omer lach, b'damayi chayi. We say this in every bris. I said, by your blood you should live, by your blood you should live. V'avar alayich, and I passed by you, v'erech, and I saw you, v'hine itech eis dodim, and behold, it was the time of your love. V'efresh kanfei alayich, and God says, I spread my garment over you. Okay, so it is, we understand that the purpose of something is most apparent at its beginning. In fact, what do we say in Lechadodi on Friday nights? Yes, you remember, Lechadodi that we sing on Friday nights? Yeah, you want to remind, hey, sing it for us. Come on, Ronnie. Tired from last night. What was last night?
Did a function last minute, the 58th wedding anniversary.
Sure. So give us a rendition. All right. So what do we say? Sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila. The final deed is first in thought. Okay. So this is when you set forth the vision, the goal of your project. The very beginning of your project, you see all the way to the end if you want it to be a successful project, right? The entire planning and execution of the project revolves around the goal that is established at the very beginning. That's why we say this in Lechadodi. We describe that God created man the very last, because the whole purpose of the world's existence is creation of man. You can look even in the Parshas. Last week Parsha spoke about the animals. This week's Parsha talks about the birth of the human being. So this is the idea that we say in Lechadodi, okay, that Sof Ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila. How does it go? Likrat Shabbat lechu v'neicha ki mekor haberacha merosh mikedem nesucha sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila lechadodi likrat kala p'nei Shabbat nekabela. So if the whole story of the Exodus is the story of our birth as a Jewish nation, then it stands to reason that the overall purpose, the mission, the goal of the Jewish nation can be found within that story. Right? The Exodus is when the Jewish project began, and therefore should be the moment when the aims and the objectives are apparent. Now, let's try to understand this. Closeness to God, freedom from oppression, the right to practice Torah and mitzvahs are all clear parts of the Exodus story and are indeed ingrained into the very mission of the Jewish people. Which leads us to our question. What about the Carbon Pesach? Right? What about this strange sacrifice that what's it all about? How is it part of the vision, the mission, the purpose of our nation? If God felt that the Jewish people must bring this sacrifice at the very dawn of our nationhood, then there must be something profound about it. What is its message that we have to understand? How is this relevant to us as a Jewish people? Let me just put that aside. Okay. So we have two suggestions here. Roslin's saying that in order to be a Jewish nation, in order to survive the struggles, the challenges, the oppression, the difficulties, all of our history that's just fraught with all of these struggles, you're going to need Mesirat Nefesh, which ties into what Malcolm was saying. The deity of Egypt was a lamb, was a sheep. And therefore, for a Jew to take that and offer it as a sacrifice, firstly, Roslin's point of Mesirat Nefesh, it has to be a commitment to God. And secondly, there certainly wasn't this idea of not being afraid, no fear from the Egyptians. And that's why it had to be roasted on a spit. It had to be dried, where there was going to be that aroma, the flavors, the smell, something that everyone will experience. And you'll smell it from everywhere. Well, that certainly is it. Part of it. Let's discuss it. To understand the message of the Carbon Pesach, I want to examine it and explore it a little bit more with you. Because we know that the sacrifices ultimately were offered in the temple. But there was no temple yet at this stage. Was there? Right? So at this stage, the Carbon Pesach was offered where? In your home. That's right. In your home. Now, of course, we have to discuss and understand that, because I want to illustrate to you, especially as we see the picture here of Edna's sister, and as we dedicate the shir to your sister of blessed memory, Edna, we need to remember the importance of the home. So what we're going to highlight here is the difference between the sacrifices that were offered in the temple versus this, which was offered at home. Let's first learn a Mishnah. The Mishnah tells us as follows. Once the temple was built, you cannot offer a sacrifice anywhere other than the temple. This concept called a bama. You know what a bama is? You know, it's such a bama when somebody disappoints me. Boy, is that a bama. Okay, let me read the Mishnah to you. It says as follows in the Mishnah in Tractate Zvachim, which is the tractate of the Talmud that deals with sacrifices. It says the Mishnah, Mishkan, before the tabernacle was erected, then you were allowed to offer a sacrifice elsewhere, such as at home. So, was there a temple yet when the Jews left Egypt? No. So they offered it at home. The Mishnah continues, okay, then at that stage, the service was performed by whom? Bechorot in your Hebrew. The firstborns. So who are the Kohanim? Who were the ones who administered the sacrificial service before the temple was built? Firstborns. Remember, they lost that privilege when? The golden calf. Very good. Continues the Mishnah, and it says as follows. Mishahukam Mishkan. Once the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was built, Nesru Habamais, all other altars were disqualified, were prohibited, were banned. You couldn't offer a sacrifice anywhere outside the temple. Va'avodas HaKohanim, and who were the ones who did the service in the temple? Not the firstborns. But just remember this point here. Where was this sacrifice offered? At home. Who was the one? Who were the ones who this plague was saving, was rescuing? Firstborns. Very good. Pay attention to this. It's good. I like your participation. Because you were at Cynthia's class this morning and you learned the memory techniques and tools, everyone's involved. Alert. Good. Says the Mishnah continuing. I'm not reading everything. I'm just going to read a few points. Ba'ul Gilgal, when they came to the place called Gilgal in Israel, the Hutra Bamas, the outer altars were permitted again. Ba'ul Yerushalayim, once the Jews came to Jerusalem and built the temple, what happened then? Nesra Habamas, the Bamot, the outside altars, a home alteration, was forbidden, was prohibited, and it was never again permitted. So today, if I want to offer a sacrifice here at Chabad House, can I do so? I remember one of my rabbis in Kollel reminding us that our wives, what did he say? No, he said, your children are not the Carbon Pesach, and dust is not chametz. Okay. What is interesting here is that they brought it in their own homes. Generally speaking, as the Mishnah said, when there was no temple and sacrifices were offered upon private bamas, then you try to find a fitting place to bring the sacrifice, right? So you're bringing a sacrifice to God. What's the most appropriate place to do this? Well, let's look in the Torah. I'm going to rewind my Chumash now to Genesis, to Bereshis. And it says, Vayava Yaakov Luza. When Yaakov came to Luz, Asher Be'eretz Canaan, which is the land of Canaan, he Bet El, which is Bethel. V'chola Amashima, he and all the people who were with him. What does it say? Vayiven Shamizbeach, he built an altar. Vayikra Lamakam El Beit El. He called this place El Bet El. Kisham Nigu Alav HaElokim, because that's where God revealed himself to him. Bevarcha Mipnei Achiv, when he escaped the wrath of his brother. What was his brother's name? Esau. Very good. So the Torah makes it clear that Yaakov specifically chose a place that God had previously appeared to him at that specific location in order for him to offer his sacrifice there. Pardon? No, was that the burning bush? No. The burning bush takes place at Sinai. No, because Sinai is where the burning bush took place, and this is in Canaan. Okay. So this is not at Sinai. Yes. Sinai, according to, we had a lady who came here a few years ago and gave us a tour. Anyone remember her name? Margaret Thatcher. No. Margaret Rowitz. Yeah? Margaret Rowitz. She gave us a tour of her version, which sounds very reliable, of where she thinks it was, and I think she said Saudi Arabia, if I recall correctly. All right? But it wasn't in Israel. But when it came to the Carbon Pesach, we didn't go to Bet El. We didn't go to a particular place. Not only did the Jews not choose a particular specific place, they were commanded to individually offer their personal sacrifice. Where? In their own homes. Clive, where's Clive today? Clive usually asks, why? Why was it so important that they each bring the sacrifice in their own home? Wouldn't it be better to get together and prepare some other appropriate place? Do I see? Clive, you're on here. Oh, yeah, but you're muted. No worries. So, why at home? In order to understand the significance of the command to bring the Carbon Pesach at home, we need to look at another important ritual of the original Carbon Pesach, which was what I showed you before, the blood that was placed on the doorposts. Because obviously there's significance to this detail. What was it about? There were many sacrifices offered in the temple. And generally speaking, the process was very similar for all of them. What happened? They were slaughtered and were offered on the altar, they were burned. If you were here a few weeks ago, I gave a share and we discussed the difference between different sacrifices. Some were completely burned on the altar. Usually that had to do with a sin offering, whereas a festive offering was less burned on the altar, more shared with your friends. Okay? So obviously the altar played an important role, right? The most important act of any sacrifice was sprinkling the blood on the altar. That was one of the most important elements of any sacrifice, where they sprinkled the blood on the altar. It's the best image Google could provide me for this. Okay? So, as you can see, the priest would collect some of the animal's blood. Now, is that similar to the Carbon Pesach? Where did you sprinkle the blood for the Carbon Pesach? On the doorpost. So, in the temple, it was on the altar. At home, where? On your doorpost. Very good. Can I read it to you from the Gemara? Just so we get the sources as well. Says the Gemara, Imure Pesach Mitzrayim, Heicha Akatrinhu. Where did they burn the innards of the Carbon Pesach? Because generally speaking, the innards were burned on the altar. So the Gemara explains in the name of Abaya, they were roasted with the rest, okay, and eaten. So parts of it were eaten, parts of it were burned. And the Gemara goes on to say, there were 3 altars for the Carbon Pesach. So let's understand it. One is placing the blood on the lintel, and one is placing on the lintel, and then you have the 2 doorposts. Okay, so the doorpost took the place of the Mizbeach, of the altar. What does this tell us? That the blood on the doorpost was not only somehow to ward off the angel of death, as we read before from Rashi, but was actually an integral, critical part of the Carbon Pesach. The door itself was considered the altar of God. Okay? So we're analyzing this. This means that if the blood was not placed on the doorposts, just like if you were offering a sacrifice in the temple, and as it had to be placed on the altar, here too we're saying, thank you, it's just itchy, I don't know why. So, just as it was critical for it to be sprinkled on the altar, here we're saying not only would the family be at risk of the angel of death entering your home, but the sacrifice would be invalid if it wasn't fulfilled in this way. Okay, it seems like, what's the significance of it? Is it really important that the blood be sprinkled on the altar? Well, just like the blood had to be sprinkled on the altar, it had to be placed on your doorpost. Which leads us to a very interesting idea. Something truly unique took place in the original Carbon Pesach, which is that your home, where you offered the sacrifice, became like the temple, became Jerusalem. It became the holy temple. Your doorpost became the Mizbeach, the altar. Interesting, eh? Yes, so the truth is, Ronnie's saying, in every place you call God's name, there I'll bless you. Your home plays a critical role. Yes. Absolutely. That's part of it. But watch this. Look at the diagram that I'm putting on the screen. And this diagram will illustrate to us the difference between a regular Carbon Pesach or any carbon, a sacrifice offered, versus the first Paschal lamb that was offered where? Where in Egypt? In your home. So a regular regular carbon Pesach, where did you have to offer it and eat it? In Jerusalem. Josephus, who was the CNN, the what do you call it? What's the British one? BBC of his time. He describes it. Millions of people came to Jerusalem, and thousands, hundreds of thousands of sheep were sacrificed. But what happened in Egypt? Pardon? Only in your home. Very good. Let's look at the next difference. Where did you slaughter the sacrifice when you went to Jerusalem? Only in the temple. First Carbon Pesach? At home. Very good. What did you do with the blood generally in the temple? You sprinkled it on the altar. What did you do with the blood in the first Carbon Pesach? Very good. So we analyze this and we see that the differences. In fact, the Gemara tells us, let's read it quickly from the Talmud. It says, Pesach Mitzrayim. What happened in Egypt? It says, the verse says very clearly, the Atem lo seitzu ish mi Pesach beisa. Nobody should leave their home until the morning. Masha'en came Pesach Doros, whereas the future Pesachs, of course you left your home. Where did you offer it? In Jerusalem, in the temple. Pesach Mitzrayim kolacha v'echad shechet b'tech beisa. But in Egypt, everyone offered in their house. Pesach Doros kol Yisrael shachtim b'makom echad. But in the future, it was all in Jerusalem in the temple. Whereas in the original, each home, every single house. So what is this doing? It's pointing in the same direction. In Egypt, as the Jewish nation was being formed, where were they formed? Where was the nationhood founded and began? Where? At home. Edna, where did you have the most precious times with your sister of blessed memory? At home. Right? That's where you got to share those precious moments together. So your very home, your home was like a temple for God. Now, this, my friends, perhaps gives us a little insight into why the Jews were not allowed to leave their homes that night. And the importance of offering the sacrifice in each home. Not as a community as they did in the future, and not in a designated spot like Yaakov did. This was a concerted effort to transform your home into a holy place, which is something each of us must do with our homes as well. This was a powerful lesson of the lockdown, where God was saying, I'm in control. It will be all right. You do it at home. You be at home. Yes, your home certainly is, and we mustn't forget it. Oftentimes people forget about the home. What's fascinating that I just noticed, this is a national holiday, right? Pesach is something that happened to their nation, to the entire nation of the Jewish people. Yet where do we celebrate it? At home with your family, or at the Pesach retreat with your family. Whereas Yizkar, which is a personal commemoration, right? If you look up here, you could see we're blocking it now, but here's a Yizkar board where behind the screen is a Yizkar memorial board where we commemorate the memory of people who've passed on. Where do we do that? Not at home, in shul. You know, irony is in my shul, I think we have our memorial board pledged by sponsors already 5 times. At least 5 people promised they're going to buy a memorial board for my shul where everybody can memorialize their loved ones. I still don't have it in my shul. You know the story about the thieves who broke into the shul? They stole millions of rands and pledges. God wanted the Jews to take all the energy and embed it where? In the home. And so they weren't allowed to leave that entire night. That's what the verse says. To ensure that the experience would be maximized and would have the best chance for success. Because at home is where, what did they say? At home is where, what's the expression? Home is where the heart is. I want to read it to you in the words of the Rebbe in Yiddish.
Home is your castle.
Yes? Let me read it to you in the Rebbe's words in Yiddish, okay? He says, Das is der Tam, this is the reason, was dafke bei Pesach Mitzrayim is given die Tzivay as kol echad ve'echad shechit b'seich Pesach. The verse in the Torah says, do it at home, as in Yonef from Carbon Pesach soll durchnehmen der bias von Yadin, because the home is the most important place, and the home should be permeated with that element. Zrika Saddam al Mashkov, the home was turned into the altar. It was a home alteration. Bizas der bias wird verwandelt in Amakem Achilas Pesach. That the home becomes, it's transformed into a place where the sacrifice is consumed. You've heard from me many times the idea about sacrifice. The Hebrew word for sacrifice is carbon. Carbon doesn't only mean sacrifice, but karov means to come close. You want to come close to others. It happens at home, particularly to your family. And that's why they were told not to leave the house. You want to cultivate this relationship. It has to begin. It has to happen. Where? In the home. And so, as we discussed before, Sof Ma'aseh b'Machshava Tchila, that the beginning of any given endeavor, project, shows us the ultimate vision and goal, if you plan it correctly, right? And in this case, the birth of the Jewish people, of our nation, the very first sacrifice that they were commanded, that they were obligated to offer, to bring, the Carbon Pesach, was not in the temple, was not even in some kind of communal center, but where? At home. And that shows us that the ultimate purpose of the temple and of the sacrifices is to make our own homes holy. Turn your house into a temple, into an altar of God. I want to read a few of the Rebbe's words to you more in Yiddish. He says, "V'baldas Pesach Mitzrayim is given bisman leidas Am Yisrael," because the Carbon Pesach in Egypt came to the birth of the Jewish nation. It was the most important and clearly demonstrated time that the Jewish nation was being born. It was the mission statement, the beginning of our people. So we had to know that happens where? Yes, you go to shul, but you have to remember the importance of your home, that your home is a holy place. That concept that, who said before about Mikdash Ma'at, make your home into a miniature temple. The objective of God's creation of the world, of each of our missions and purpose of why we're here. Edna, your sister, had a unique, indispensable mission here in this world. And now she concluded her mission. She refined, she fulfilled her mission and purpose. Each one of us has a divine mission in this world. Yes, it's true that the temple was God's primary and most visible home on earth, but each of us is a walking, living monument of God. And we have to know that our home, not just our homes, wherever we are a walking Jerusalem. You know, there was an individual who once wanted to move to Israel, wanted to make Aliyah. You know, Israel's a holy place to live. And circumstances didn't work for him. And he turned to his Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, and he said, what should I do? I want to live in Israel, but I can't. Tzemach Tzedek said, very simple, Machda Eretz Yisrael. Make Israel here. Wherever you are, you could be living in Israel. Meaning, of course, there's a certain sanctity and holiness of living in Israel. Avira de Eretz Yisrael Machkim, the ear of the land is already so holy that it makes one wise, the Gemara says. You can't get there. Make it happen here. Well, the verse we read a few weeks ago, God's instruction, build for me a sanctuary and I'll dwell in them. In each one of us, God dwells. So we have to realize it's not limited to a structure, to a temple, to a tabernacle. But each one of us are that walking, living temple in our own hearts, in our own space. Each of our souls is a miniature sanctuary of God. And the Gemara tells us about the windows of the temple. They were uniquely constructed. Why? Ancient windows, the way it used to work was, the windows would be narrow on the outside and wide on the inside. You could go to old buildings to see what I'm talking about, in order to draw in as much light as possible. But the way King Solomon built the temple, he built it the opposite. He built it in a way that the windows were narrow on the inside but wide on the outside. Why? Because the temple was meant to share light with the world. The same you could say about each one of us. We are meant to be shining lamplighters. We are meant to illuminate our surroundings. Just as the temple brought light into the universe, the temple didn't need the light from outside. The temple was to shine light outside. Each one of us is to be a light to the world. Each one of us has to bring that light, transform the world just like the temple brought light to the universe. Each one of us, if our heart is a flame, Bilevavi Mishkan Evne, I build the sanctuary in my heart, then I'm bringing that light from my home, because the home is where the heart is. Then I could transform the entire world. Okay? So what we realize, that the temple in Jerusalem is a model of sorts. A model of godly comfort. And the model was supposed to serve as an inspiration for all of us, for all of eternity, that each of our hearts and homes will bring light to the whole world. Let me share it with you from one of the prayers that we say every morning. Every morning we say, Ribono Shel Olamim, Master of the Universe, Ata Tzivisanu, you commanded us, Lahakriv Korban Atamid B'mayadai, to offer the daily sacrifice in its particular times. Ulahaktir Akteris Bismana, and to burn the incense, right? In the temple we did that. Each in its proper time. Veliyos hakohanim b'avedasam, and for the priests to function, to serve their purpose. Ulevim b'duchanam, and the Levites to sing on their platform. V'yisra b'ma'amadam, and for the rest of the nation to take their station. V'ata b'avaneseinu, and what happened? Sadly, our temple was destroyed because of our sins. Ubutal tamid, and the tamid, the sacrifice, and the ktaris, and the incense are no longer, right? That's seized. We have no Kohen today ministering in the temple. And no Levites singing on the platforms of the temple. And do you see us in the temple in Jerusalem? No. Therefore we say in our prayer, Yehi ratzem lefanecha, may it be your will, Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokeinu, the Lord of our ancestors, our God and God of our ancestors, sheyebaneh beis hamikdash, that the temple be rebuilt, b'meira v'yameinu, speedily in our days, v'sein chalkeinu b'soir asecha, and that we should have our portion in your Torah. So we can hear that yearning, the longing to finally be able to serve God again properly in the Beis HaMikdash. So why did God allow for the temple to be destroyed if our ultimate goal is to serve in the temple? We're going to stay here till we figure this out.
the second time.
If you look at the parsha we're reading now, we're reading the book of Vayikra. What does the whole book of Vayikra talk about? It describes the temple's service, right? It describes all the sacrifices that were offered there every day. And if you go to the last book of the Torah, the book of Shmos, talked about the building of the Mishkan. And if you go to the next book, Bamidbar, it talks about further the service in the temple. So, and in fact, a majority of the 613 commandments, which today we can hardly, how many of the commandments do we actually observe? Most of the commandments deal with what? The temple. The service in the temple. The laws of the sacrifices. This week's parsha is filled with laws of ritual purity and impurity. None of those laws apply today. If you go to this week's parsha, Tazria, it talks about if a woman gives birth and is in a state of ritual impurity. It is not what we talk about, the laws of Nida that we discussed, that apply today. What does it talk about? Who could go into the temple? When you are allowed to go to offer your sacrifice. With the destruction of the temple, how many of those commandments do we have today? 87 out of the 248 positive commandments. That's it. All the negatives, of course, don't do this, don't do that, always apply. But of the 248 positive commandments, only 87 of the positive mitzvahs are applicable today. 33%. So how's this possible? What implications does this have for the integrity of our mission and purpose to fulfill in this world? How can we spread light to the world without the light of God's commandments if we have such a diminished number of commandments to observe today? But my friends, remember, where did the original sacrifice take place? At home. So even though we no longer have our temple, regardless of the physical location and state of the actual temple, so long as we are teaching the values of our Judaism to our family at home. Edna, I know, even though I didn't know your parents, but I know your parents raised you and your sister in the most beautiful ways. How do I know? Because I know you. And all of us who know you know that you must have had the most wonderful parents to raise you at home. The values, the morals that you grew up with in your home, no doubt permeated you with that divine mandate that you are able to shine and spread that light. Just as your parents gave it to you and your sister at home. How many siblings were you? The two of you. Two shining bright lights. Exactly that. The temple exists in each of us, in our hearts. But where do you get that light? At home. That's where your parents gave it to you and your sister. And now that light is just left with you, Edna, to continue. Not too much pressure, but to continue your sister's mission with your family. And let's just remember that that mission is not over. When we say Kaddish, you know what we're declaring in Kaddish? We don't say the name of the deceased. When we say Kaddish, we are saying that no longer is she here to continue her divine mission, but guess what? You are here to continue June's mission in this world. Right? Freda Bat Meir is no longer able to continue it, but you and your family can continue that mission. The purpose of a temple is not so that Jerusalem could be a place for God and worshiping God and everywhere else is exempt. No. Whether in Joburg or where did she live? Melbourne? Where did your sister live, Edna? Where? Where? Sydney. Whether in Sydney or Joburg. Whether in Iriamim or Cape Town. Wherever you might be. We have to remember, as God told our ancestors at the very birth of our people, the beginning was not as a communal sacrifice. We're at home. The purpose was to make each of our homes sacred and holy, Transform your home. Not to have this detached holy place where we travel on pilgrimage, only in Jerusalem, only in Mecca. Nah. Where's your dira batachtonim? Your Beit HaMikdash, it was in Jerusalem. But each one of us is a walking temple of God. That was a prototype, so to say. Right? It was like a training center where we could experience godliness, but the idea then was to bring it back home. Take it from Jerusalem and bring it to your home. The essence of our mission always was and always will be, we're in our homes. So my friends, that's the place it has to be. Let me share with you a story. One time, Rabbi Moshe Leib Sassover went to visit his Rebbe, Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk. He went to him for Shabbos. A chassid always wants to go and experience a Shabbos with his Rebbe. And so he went to his Rebbe, and it was a Shabbos Parshas Bo, where we read about the Exodus. We read about the last three plagues, including this one, the death of the firstborn. And so the Rebbe asked Rav Moshe Leib to share a Dvar Torah, a thought at the Shabbos table. Rav Moshe Leib said, in front of my Rebbe I should speak. Okay? He didn't want to say Torah in front of his great scholar and teacher, his Rebbe. But his Rebbe urged him, and if Rabbi Elimelech begged him to do so, okay, he was forced to comply. So he began. He said, we read in the Parsha, what does it say? Va'amartem zevach Pesach. You should say that it was the sacrifice of this Carbon Pesach that God passed over the homes of Israel. Now everyone knows the word Pesach means what? What's the meaning of the word Pesach? Huh? That he jumped over, exactly, the name of the holiday, passed over. But the verse says, Asher Pasach Al, which literally means not that he jumped over, but that he jumped on the houses. Huh? So what does it mean? Said Rav Moshe Leib, on the night of Pesach in Egypt, God went with all the angels, and they all saw the Jewish people bringing the Carbon Pesach. At that time, God had such immense joy, such nachas. He and all the angels were so ecstatic that God and all the angels started dancing on the homes of the Jewish people. They were dancing and pointing down to the homes of the Jewish people. They were saying, oh, there's a Jewish home. Look at them, the faith they have. Here's a Jew. And so Rav Moshe Leib jumped up and he started dancing on the table in front of his Rebbe. And he said, Dov Tayid, here lives a Jew. Dov Tayid. We want that our homes could be like the home in which Edna and your sister were raised in. What type of a home? A Dov Tayid, a home of Jewish values. The ultimate goal of creation of the Torah, of mitzvahs, of the whole temple is to make our personal homes, our world around us into a temple, a holy place for God. Transform your home. This includes our personal space, even our most mundane affairs. We have to remember that it should all be holy. It should be the place where we could say, a Davoin Tayid, a miniature temple. The critical role of each one of us is to realize that we have to be like the temple, to be a shining light into the world. And so let me share with you a quote from one of the most famous history books ever. The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire by Sir Edward Gibbon. It was published in England in 1788. And the truth is, although I'll read it to you, there's a video that does a better job, but I don't know if I have time to play the video for you. But Sir Edward Gibbon writes, there are 5 basic reasons why great civilizations wither and die. Number one, the undermining of the dignity and sanctity of the home, which is the basis of human society. Number one is the dignity of the home, okay? A Jewish home is not just a place where we sleep, but it's a place where we study, a place where we pray, a place in your kitchen when you're about to eat yourself, you put tzedakah in the charity box because you realize that even my room, my kitchen, my home has to be a place where I give and I'm considerate for others. So number one, Sir Edward Gibbon says, if the home is undermined, that's the downfall of those people. Number two, he says, higher and higher taxes, the spending of public money for free bread, and circuses for the populace, something that Rome was very renowned for and eventually fell. By the way, I saw that President Biden wants to raise the taxes in the U.S. He wants to put a 20% millionaires tax. Now, listen, I don't know. I'm not sure how taxes work here, because here I believe that 5% of the people pay 45% tax or something. I don't know the numbers. But, pardon? Yeah, I think he's putting it on millionaires, a 20% additional tax. The third thing Sir Edward Gibbon says is the mad craze for pleasure. Sports becoming every year more exciting, more brutal, and more immoral. Something very interesting we saw at the Olympics last year, where a bunch of Olympic athletes, women, chose to dress modestly because it became a spectacle of their bodies instead of their sport, of their talent. Number four, the building of great armaments when the great enemy was within, the decay of individual responsibility. And number five, very interestingly, the decay of religion, fading into a mere form, losing touch with life, losing power to guide the people. Those are the 5 points that Sir Edward Gibbons gave for the rise and fall of the great Roman Empire. Now, all these points are interesting, definitely debatable and discussable, okay? Probably as pertinent today as they were back then. But if this is a recipe for disaster, the Western world, I don't know how well we're doing today. Okay, if you review those and realize, I don't know what place we're in. But if we want to just focus on the first point, what is the sanctity of the home, of a marriage? The home. The home is the basic human unit of society. When marriages are healthy, they create healthy, wholesome homes. A nurturing environment is a safe haven where people develop and grow. You know, you can have the fanciest house in the world. That's not a home. A home is where the heart is, right? And I think it's integral to making healthy people. Healthy people become good citizens who together build a just and functioning society. So, when he speaks of the sanctity of marriage and the family and the home, I don't know if he's referring to how religious the home is, but the important role of the home and the family itself. Family itself is sacred. Family is godly. So he discusses this fundamental point. And according to Judaism, religion is not primarily practiced, as we said so many times, in shul. There's so much more of religion that happens at home. But I was saying about the Yiskar boards, we take our personal matters, we bring it to shul. But we take our national communal matters, the Carbon Pesach, where do we bring that? At home. So religion has a lot of elements to it. We saw it throughout lockdown, okay? Oftentimes we're pulled out of the home, whether it's to go to shul or to do other things. You know, they say that each of our patriarchs founded another one of the prayers. So Abraham started Shacharis, the morning prayers. Yitzchak Mincha in the afternoon. You know why Yaakov founded the evening prayers? He had 13 kids at home, right? 12 boys and a girl, Dina. And he said, I don't want to do bedtime with all these kids at home. I'm out of here. Just kidding. The home is such an important place, okay? And as we discussed over and over today, it's the place where children and parents and siblings, as Edna and your sister, cultivated your relationships at home. And let me ask you, if you all know, there are 4 volumes of Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. Orach Chaim, Yoredeya, Even HaEzer, and Choshen Mishpat. Of the 4, the first has one tiny section about the synagogue. The rest, you want to know what it's about? The home, the kitchen, lots of laws of kashrut, the bedroom, your office, how to conduct business. That's our religion. And that's what we have to realize, the importance of our home. Whether it's in the kitchen or your bedroom or wherever you might be, the home is the most important place. And so, as you saw in the words of Sir Edwin Gibbons, we have to remember the significance of the home, the role that it plays, and each of us as well to remember 95% of Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, is about the home. Each of us has to remember that too. I want to conclude with one more quote from the Rebbe, from a Sicha, a talk he gave, and he says as follows: we have to know that no matter who we are, even if you don't come from the family of Aaron the high priest, but just as that priest served God in the temple, each one of us serves God in your home and in the world. Says the Rebbe, a woman must know that when she takes care of the home, making sure it is clean, tending to the clothing, she must know that God has crowned every man and woman with the title of Mamlechet Kohanim. All of us are a priestly nation. And therefore every woman must feel at all times that you are just like the Kohen serving God in the temple. You are serving God in your home or wherever you are. Even when you're walking around, right? If you're checking in your house, checking in the rooms, making sure the home is protected, that is part of your service in this world. And each one of us has that divine mandate and mission to fulfill, to bring holiness to the world around us. We wish you long life, Edna. May your sister's neshama have an aliyah. May each of us, please God, emulate her ways. And please join us here once again tomorrow. Thank you, Cynthia, for a beautiful memory session this morning. Thank you, everyone, for participating. And next Monday, once again, and the following Monday, then we have a 2-week Pesach break, and then we'll be back. Okay. Thank you all for joining. See you, please God.